and we're live. Take it away, AJ.
Awesome. Thanks, Quartz. All right, really excited to get into this today. We're going to be talking about the Jungle Cup meta discussion. We did push back the time, so we have a few extra people that we thought would be able to give some good information. We'll start with Master. He's a quarterfinalist to the North American Championships for the Sylph Arena. He's also a battle analyst here at Go Stadium. For those of you who are very generous with your Patreon support, you get access to a channel where Master and many other battle analysts will be able to give you guys advice and all kinds of information on like upper level tactics. And he's also a longtime member of Go Stadium. We were all cheering for him during the Sylph Arena Championships. We also have another longtime member of Go Stadium, JRE Seawolf. You guys might know him as JRE 47. He's a Sylph Arena subreddit contributor, and he's the author of the Nifty or Thrifty series, and as well as the Under the Light series. Very colorful analysis from JRE. We love hearing his analysis and roasting him when he's wrong. We also have Gotts. He's the master of spreadsheets here at Go Stadium. He goes into the weeds with meta discussions. Thanks to him, we're able to really pick apart the meta in a way that makes sense. Every month, he's the one making the spreadsheets based on the PvPoke simulations, and we're super grateful for that. And then we have the stream team. I think Justin might be running a few minutes late, but yours truly, Squawk, will be doing most of the managing here, just guiding some of the discussion. Some of the questions were sent in advance, and some of them were meant to put our battle analysts and our invitees on the spot. I'll also introduce Smogon Devo. He's also a frequent contributor within the Go Stadium Discord. He's got some interesting tactics here for the Jungle Cup that were a bit of a blind spot, if I'm honest. So I'm very interested to have him on. And we might also have Caleb, depending on his time frame. He might be jumping in and giving us some also interesting tactics that he's brewing with. Before we begin, I'd like to say that during one of our previous live streams, PvPoke announced that there is a big update increasing the accuracy of simulations. So a lot of our analysis were based on the previous analysis. So there is a possibility that we might have overlooked one of the matchups in favor of one of the previous matchups. So I'll actually start with Gotts here. Gotts, were there any notable changes within the matchups after the update?
Well, the update was twofold. There was the actual combat mechanics, and then the change to max IVs. Well, not max IVs, but max stat product, which has actually been backtracked a little bit. The max stat product was probably the biggest change, as a lot of matchups flipped from just breakpoints and whereas the actual combat mechanics changed a few matchups, made some things weaker, but not drastically. This from what
So no real notable matchups that were like totally flipped, as far as you know, within this current meta.
No, I don't think anybody really drastically changed. Basically, what a lot of it was the fringe cases, where you'd be winning by a hair's breadth or losing by a hair's breadth. Those flipped, but those can still be winning or losing by a hair's breadth based on energy or piggybacking or any number of other mechanics.
Awesome. Well, that's good news. I know that there were some that, again, they were really close. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe with this discussion uncovers some of that. You might be seeing the infographic on the stream for those of you who are watching on via Twitch or YouTube. Basically, we're going to be starting with the center, going across to grass, and then working our way counterclockwise through each section. And we'll try to accommodate some questions. At some point, I will ask Quartz if there's any questions coming from the audience, but we will try to keep it relevant to the current discussion. So we're not going to be talking about Venusaur necessarily during the counter users, right? So while we're talking about Vigoroth, we want to kind of stay on topic there. With that being said, we'll get right to it. The counter users straight in the center of the graphic, namely Vigoroth, is what the meta really hinges on. There's only 4 counter users available in jungle, and one of them is Ursaring, which is pretty crummy as a choice because it doesn't really do anything that it would as far as like beating Vigoroth, you know? The main reason for relevance is to be able to beat Vigoroth, but both Heracross and Breloom have some interesting niches. So we'll start with you, Choost. Do you see yourself running Heracross?
I mean, it's definitely on my short list. It's definitely one of the meta definers as like the hardest Vigoroth counter that's out there. And I would also say it's one of the only things to like scare off a Vigoroth. It's the only thing on your lineup that'll make them think twice. Because most of the other Vigoroth counters, you're not overwhelming them most of the time. That's one of the few hard counters that are out there.
You still have to switch out pretty quickly, right? Because you rely on the fast move damage, so you don't want to take too many body slams.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, that there is nothing that can like farm a Vigoroth, you know? So we're talking about smaller levels of countering than we're used to with the big meta definers.
Mm-hmm. So anybody here not have a Heracross or not able to trade for a Heracross so far? I think everybody should have one within this group. Maybe Smogon, you got a Heracross up there in Toronto?
Yeah, I have a few actually that I'm sitting on. I haven't really
That's
second
nice.
moved any yet, but...
So choose, not for this group particularly, but if you had to give advice to a player that didn't have access to Heracross, what would you say they need to look out for?
Well, it's interesting because the thing that operates closest to it would be Breloom, but I actually wouldn't advise that necessarily because it's the same role as a Heracross, but does it a little bit worse. You can't switch in on a Vigoroth, for example. So it's just a version that doesn't actually get you what you need. So I would actually honestly look for either going in for some of the other bug types that we'll get into later, like Beedrill, Vespiquen, that are still solid counters to Vigoroth. But also, one of the things that you can do is rather than bring your hard counter, you can just have a lot more checks. So things like bringing Alolan Raichu as one of your electrics, just things to keep it a little bit harder for Vigoroth to run roughshod on you.
So you would say that a counter user isn't necessarily required. Perhaps Vigoroth is, but we'll get into that later.
Right, yeah. A non-Vigo counter user, I would say, is highly recommended, but you can totally work around it.
Sure. Okay. So speaking of Breloom, we have JRE here. I don't think any of your underlights have been focused on Breloom. Have they? I don't recall. I think I've seen a Cradily for sure.
No, not as of yet, partly because I'm not a huge fan of it.
Ooh, okay.
Choose stated. I mean, it can't switch into Vigoroth. That's the main role you want to bring it for. So,
so you really want to get that
Vigoroth.
Heracross. Right. So you don't think it's a good replacement to Heracross, but inevitably people are going to run it, right? So what would you say are the preferred moves for Breloom, specifically the fast move and the charge move?
So the fast move, for the purpose you're going to use Breloom for, you definitely want counter. I think the one charge move that you really want to have would be Seed Bomb, just because of the speed of it. Because Breloom is glassy, spots where you can't get to a dynamic punch, or at least to a second one, or a sludge bomb or something like that. If you can at least fire off another Seed Bomb, which charges faster, that's something you're going to want to have. Sims before the stream, there's not a huge difference, at least against the more meta picks, between Sludge Bomb and Dynamic Punch. The one big difference I did see was with Dynamic Punch, it wins against Forretress. That with Sludge Bomb, the best it can do is fire off another Seed Bomb and die. With Dynamic Punch, it lives. It's a close win, but it wins with 18 hit points, which Fortress is primarily brought in to combat grass. That is kind of significant.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Anybody else seeing other moves being run by Breloom, maybe in scrims, that has worked out for you guys?
I honestly haven't seen any Brelooms against me in scrims.
Yeah.
It's been that, like, just it's Heracross or nothing.
Yeah.
You find something.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing.
I liked scrimming against Breloom for sure, just because I was able to switch in like a flyer. Anything with flying fast moves, it deletes it before they can see what it was. So if they're playing without sound, it's GG automatically, because they're not able to switch out fast enough to save their glass cannon. So anybody else have any experience with Breloom? I think it's died down a lot in popularity from the start, because at the beginning it was kind of like, oh, another counter user, which is really glassy, but in practice it doesn't do so well.
I could be wrong, but I think that was one of the edge cases that the update to PV Poke made us realize that, oh, it doesn't do the job we thought it did as well as it does.
Right. Yeah. I think if I had to do the graphic all over again, I might include Breloom, like maybe on the side, kind of like as an honorable mention, but only because I liked the drawing so much with the high heels. But, you know, it's not trash can worthy, but it's kind of like on the fence between honorable mention and just don't even talk about it. All right, so I guess we'll move on to polymers. I wanted to ask about Vigoroth specifically. There's a lot of discussion because everybody accepts the counter and body slam moveset, but most people are saying bulldoze over brick break. Why is that? Oh, is polymers even here? He might not be here. So I'll just throw this question at, let's see, who have I not talked to yet? Smogon, what do you think? Bulldoze over brick break on Vigoroth?
I think I'm definitely settled on bulldoze.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you look at it's a body slam, they're both 35 energy moves, but I mean, I'm kind of in the camp where brick break's not that great of a move in general, and I kind of prefer bulldoze for when I'm going up against in like a lowland golem. It's a one-shot option basically. Even against lantern, it's nice in the late game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely be on the receiving end of that bulldoze as a Raichu user. Most of the time it's just body slam, but sometimes it gets that little bit extra damage that you need in the end game.
100%. Honestly, I think you can probably get by without a second move at this point. It's usually good with body slam.
Yeah.
And when I do have the second move,
so that's
I
actually
tend to prefer bulldoze.
Yeah, that's actually my next question. So like someone who's like under serious budget constraint, what if they did forego that second move? You know, could they get by? What would they be sacrificing?
Really just, I guess, those close electric matchups where you need the extra damage, but usually 90% of the time you're going body slam anyways.
Mm-hmm. So I did want to ask Caleb, because I have a bone to pick with him. I know he's in chat. Caleb, say hi if your mic is working.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So Caleb here has taken an interest in anti-meta teams. So he's on the non-Vigoroth bandwagon. And I believe it's a bandwagon of one person, because it's just Caleb.
True.
So what are your arguments for running a Vigoroth-less team? Is it going to work out?
So I've been doing some testing. I will say that I haven't tested extensively, so I guess we'll see. But yeah, I want to. First disclaimer is I think Vigoroth is very, very strong in the meta, and just in Jungle Cup overall. So I don't want to, skew this perspective for anyone listening to think that it's not. But for me, I like to pick a lot of Pokemons in my lineup that do a very specific role. And for Vigoroth, it wins a lot of matchups, but it doesn't eat a lot of things except for a lot of the normal types. And even again, it's knocked out. It's closer than against a lot of the other normal types, and a lot of people aren't going to run or like Perugly or a lot of the normal types. It would hard counter pretty strong, and so it ends up doing a lot of very strong neutral damage to a lot of things. Reasons why I don't like Fortress as much in this meta as well, but it definitely hard counters a lot of the grass types better than Vigoroth would against a lot of its neutral matchups. So with that said, I think that's pretty much my main reasoning behind it. And then it gives me a slot to throw in something that other people won't usually have the slot for if they have a Vigoroth, right? So instead of relying on a Pokemon that's going to win a lot of neutral matchups, I could throw in something else that can hard counter some of the other things in the meta. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know if it's the best strategy yet, but I've been doing some testing, and I think matchup where I necessarily lost because I didn't have a Vigoroth. So I mean, yeah, because whatever that Vigoroth beats in this meta, I have things that also beat him in the meta, or in my lineup, and sometimes they beat him even harder, right? Like a lot of grass types can beat the rock electrics much better than Vigoroth can, right? As an example.
King IV is calling you out on chat because he says it would be extremely difficult to run a non-Vig team, but a very skilled trainer could pull off some wins. So if you don't pull off some wins, he's basically saying you're not a very skilled trainer. So.
Yep, I will step up to that challenge and see how it goes.
Yeah. A more serious question, what would you bring, or what do you think your opponents would bring more likely if, say they didn't bring, you didn't have a Vigoroth in your lineup? What would that be baiting on their end?
Yeah, so I actually feel like I've done better against people that bring Vigoroths against my line than not. Because, they're assuming that most people will bring a Vigoroth, and a lot of people do, just because it's a safe switch or a safe lead in a lot of situations. And so when they actually don't, and they bring an actual hard counter to everything in my lineup, or like the 3 I'm bringing, that's when I struggle a lot more against. But I'd say most people bring Vigoroth, depending on what I think this meta is really interesting because some people might overload on anti-flyers or anti-bug types, and then some will go the other direction, anti-electrics or anti-rock or steel types. And so it really depends on what their composition is. Yeah, I would say almost everyone is bringing Vigoroth against my team, and I think it's equivalent to almost like a Skarmory and Boulder, right? Like almost everyone's going to probably have a Vigoroth in their 3.
Right. So I'll just open this out to the group. We'll start with Gots. What teams of 3 do you find working out fine without Vigoroth? Not necessarily teams of 6, but just teams of 3.
I haven't had too much luck without Vigoroth unless I bring Heracross as a secondary counter user. So most of my time it's been like my electric, which is Golem or Graveler, Heracross, and Vespiquen. I've been a big Vespiquen. It makes me a little bit weak to grass if I don't get Vespiquen in versus, but with a bit of energy, Heracross can nuke Venusaur most of the time as well.
Interesting. So Heracross kind of pseudo filling in that Vigoroth role. What are some other lineups that you guys have tested out that have worked out without Vigoroth?
Double electric.
Jerry. Oh, double electric. Who was that?
Me.
Oh, Smogon. Okay, great. So double electric without Vigoroth. What's the third slot?
So really, the main point is like Alolan Raichu, and then your second electric. And then I was kind of messing around with like Executor, Venusaur, and Vespiquen to counter other Vigoroths. And the one I go with would just really depend on their comp.
Cool. What about Choost? Have you been running any non-Vigoroth teams of 3?
Oh, I have it on my 6 pretty solidly, but I pretty rarely bring it for the same reasons that Caleb was talking about, that it's like it's a solid safe switch. I know that it's going to pull its weight every time I use it, but it's not really filling a role of taking out something that I'm worried about. And so I've actually been doing a lot of the same with Heracross to give me my counter usage. I have been feeling a little bit locked in with that though, so I've been casting a very wide net the last few nights, and we'll see where I end up.
Personally, in scrims, I've seen, using Vigoroth in any 3 of the roles, like so as a lead, as sort of like a mid-game pivot, or even like a finisher. You can definitely take advantage of the fact that Vigoroth at a shield advantage pretty much beats anything. If you save it towards the late game with a shield. Of course, that does mean that you're sort of in an advantage point anyway, so it might just be a win bigger situation. But Vigoroth has that flexibility in teams. But you're right, a lot of people are using it as a safe switch. So, if you have something that definitely counters Vigoroth within your 3, you're going to be in a pretty good spot.
And that's actually one other thing, just because you were saying, that's part of what makes Heracross so crucial, because it's the only thing that doesn't have to worry about the shields.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it just does counter, so it does have to use a shield itself, but it just takes it out.
But you
with
can't
counter,
bank on your Vigo wiping.
Yeah. Although Beedrill and Vespiquen have pretty awesome, and Venomoth too, have pretty awesome matchups against Vigoroth. So once, while shields are up, they're able to put a pretty big dent in them, even without baits or anything like that.
I'm pretty sure Heracross is the only one that can win with just fast moves, though.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Heracross just can't win with a shield disadvantage, though. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, no, I mean, Body Slam will still definitely chunk it. You can't take 2 Body Slams.
Right. So it's kind of down to, there's an interesting matchup in PV Poke. Weepinbell actually is able to beat it just using Razor Leafs at a shield, or tie it at a shield disadvantage. So that's something to look out for, I guess. The Legacy Weepinbell. I don't know if you guys have messed around with that at all, but there is that. But it is safe to say that Vigoroth pretty much is the pivot point around which this meta revolves. So, you just have to prepare for it. I'm interested to see your non-Vigoroth team, how it performs, Caleb, and maybe you narrow down a formula that it works out without even bringing it at all.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely keep you updated.
Cool. Quartz, any good questions coming from either YouTube or Twitch that we should bring up before we move on to grass types?
I think people are just keeping up with the conversations that you're having. So, King is talking about the whole discussion about whether to bring Vigoroth or not. People are agreeing with your Weepinbell assessment.
Mm-hmm.
But no talk about Victory Bell. I guess you will get to that when we get down to the grass section, right?
Oh, definitely. We'll bring up Victory Bell.
But no questions exactly at the moment.
Yeah. King actually in his recent stream said that was doubting whether poison was super effective against grass. And I just want to give a shout out to him because that's the same impression that I was in. I think Pokemon got it wrong. I think Bug is definitely weak to poison. So I guess we'll move on from that. Maybe I'm just
unfortunately logic
tainting his knowledge.
Logic doesn't always the Pokemon type advantage just doesn't always follow logic, unfortunately. But yeah,
I guess not. But in any case, we will move on to the grass category. I'll say that in Rainbow, Venusaur was just front and center. It was able to basically sweep teams that were unprepared. There was a lot of water picks that were really, really popular in grass. But now there's just so many really powerful counters to Venusaur and a lot of checks that it needs to watch out for that are also good at other things. So I think Polymers is about to come on. We'll wait for him, his mic. So we'll move on to Gots. Do you see any viable teams of 6 that are able to forego the grass typing entirely?
I really don't at the moment. I mean, I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but it's so strong in what it does.
Mm-hmm.
The grass beat the electrics, except for Magnezone. They have really positive matchups versus Vigoroth. They have great matchups versus Heracross. And they sometimes, depending on the grass, they're not entirely weak to Bug, but most of the time they just get countered by Bug. So beating Electrics and Vigoroth is a big deal in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the grass types are pretty interesting in the coverage that they offer, because they lose to a lot of stuff, for sure. But being able to beat Vigoroth is pretty crucial. And then being able to beat all or most of the electrics is also a big deal. What's your favorite?
Venusaur or Victreebel at the moment,
Mhm.
just because
Yeah.
of the counter resistance.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So, Choost, I want to ask you a question. If you say you saw your opponent in a tournament only had Executor as his grass type, as opposed to some of the other ones that were mentioned, or the ones that are on the main part of the graphic, what would you be tempted to bring to counter it, as opposed to maybe some of the other options that Venusaur and Victreebel have as counters?
Well, this one's kind of a toss-up for me because I still have Fortress on my short list, so like
Ooh.
that would definitely be a go-to. If you aren't going with that though, you just got to make sure that you have flying coverage as opposed to a lot of the bug poisons that obviously don't do as well.
Right.
The thing that's also odd about Executor is he's grass. You're in a very tricky situation if you run into a Lantern, because Lantern is pretty dominant as a closer, whereas Executor kind of needs shields to really be effective. So you get stuck in this place where, do you leave him as your last guy to answer that Lantern, but anything but the Lantern, you're probably screwed.
Right.
And
So, have you been able to beat or play against a lot of Executors in practice?
I have not gotten to scrim against Minis, which is a little unfortunate because I always want to at least run into something in scrims before I run into it at a tournament. But
I will say, Smogon Devo got me on the Executor bandwagon, and I'd kind of like to highlight him because for me it was a bit of a blind spot. I sort of discarded it pretty early on because of all the bug types that are rampant. So, Smogon, what's your pitch on Executor? Why would we run the frail confusion user over one of the other grass types?
Yeah, well, I was kind of talking it over with a friend, and we were just kind of looking over the meta, and then we were trying to figure out a sub for Venusaur. We ended up figuring out Executor was a great sub. 2 main grass types, because they're poison types, Venusaur and Victreebel. Then it's got a lot of good matchups across the meta. I guess the main thing that sold it for me is, unlike Venusaur and Victreebel, is it doesn't auto-lose to all of the bugs. This is Beedrill, Venomoth, what else was it? And even Heracross, so really only Scyther and Vespiquen, which is a lot more than Venusaur can say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then it
No,
does well
it's
versus
not
the
the
Electrics
kind.
too.
It's definitely not the kind of mon that's going to be like sweeping teams, though, or at least not sweeping teams without like a serious energy advantage, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Well, every now and then in scrims, I've actually swept a few teams with it, just getting those
Really?
fusions and seed bombs rolling.
Mhm.
Like comp, right? Because if they have like a bug fast move mon like Quen or Fortress, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get that rolling.
Yeah. King
long as
IV
they bring
is
it.
in chat, and he says that Executor gave him nightmares during this tournament. And I think
Yeah, well,
the
the thing
you
is,
were in that tournament, right?
I was looking at a lot of the teams being put up in the help channel, and
Mm-hmm.
Executor had like 4 positive matchups versus pretty much all of them. If you think about
Mm-hmm.
it, there's Vigoroth, bug type, if it's Beedrill or Venomoth, that's a matchup for Executor. An electric type as well will usually go to Executor. So it's really easy to make your team weak to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually,
yeah, for sure.
I'm kind of going to voice the opposite opinion here. I discounted Executor pretty early on just because, not that there's not a place in the meta, but I don't think it really fills the grass role. Because, like,
No way.
Alolan Golem or Alolan Graveler, I'm pretty sure.
That's the only one that it has trouble with. But it can beat Lantern
that
and
one,
Zero.
that was what I've been running into a lot, and that's why I had put it out right away. But then also, even with Vigoroth, I think it ties the 0, and it's super close in the 1 and 2. It just, I just don't feel like it's, you want that, like what the Venusaur would be doing for you on your team. It's another one of those, like, almost gives you what Venusaur, but it gives you a ton of other bug coverage and stuff. So it does have a role. I just don't think it's the grass role.
I think it might depend on how you're playing it too. I think you probably have to try to piggyback with it just to make sure you can get off those 2 seed bombs at the right time. Because if you kind of follow the sims, it shows it seed bombing like immediately. But you want to try and get that extra energy off so you can just double seed bomb. At least that's what I do in my testing on my scrims.
All the confusion users have really forced me, at least, to be very, very concerned about over tapping. You don't want to be doing that because that's a death sentence.
Sure.
It's really the difference between beating something that's supposed to countering, or losing with just a ton of energy.
One point though that I will make, since the default sims, they were using a very heavily bulk Executor.
Mm-hmm.
Have a bulky Executor, you will find your Vigoroth matchup is a little worse. I think there actually is a counter breakpoint somewhere in there too, so that's something to look out for.
And I think PvPoke has breakpoints included as of a recent update too, which is something that Quartz is bringing up right now. So the confusion damage, and I'm not super familiar with how to read this, but it looks like the confusion reaches a breakpoint, 17 damage with a minimum attack of 140.3 against Vigoroth. So the IVs would have to be somewhere around 15, 8, 10. So it would be an attack weighted Executor. But on the flip side of that, you would have to have a minimum defense of 94.92 in order to bring the counter damage from 5 to 4, which would also be pretty huge, I imagine. So I don't know if there's a possible Executor that reaches both that breakpoint and the bulk point against Vigoroth, but it'd be interesting to see if someone can come up with that. I would like to highlight one grass type that doesn't really function as a grass type, if we're fair. It's Cradily. JRE Seawolf, I know you brought up a very colorful article under your Under the Lights Reddit post about Cradily. What's the scoop on Cradily?
So Cradily is really a rock type in disguise. It's an oddball. Its best fast move is actually a bug move. It can tie or outright beat pretty much every other grass in the meta. Executor, it can actually beat with just Infestation.
Mm-hmm.
The need to use a charge move. Venusaur, it ties. Meganium, it close win. Pretty much every other grass you're going to see, it can take down. In some cases, it goes down with it. Changed a little bit since the updates to PvPoke. But it's a grass type that can take out the other grasses, and its charge moves are Grass Knot, which is, of course, a grass move, and then Stone Edge. Infestation charges both of those up to a Stone Edge a lot faster than you may feel like you would with a lot of other mons. Because of that, it's also very good against bugs. Obviously, if it lands just one Stone Edge against pretty much any bug, it's almost a one-hit kill for any of them. And obviously, Stone Edge also makes it good against the flying types. It's a grass type, but it really performs more like a rock / bug, perhaps. The other advantage to it is obviously not a lot of people talk a lot about Cradily, at least at this point. So its moveset is so varied, some folks won't even know what's coming. That may change as the month goes on, and certainly the downside to writing articles about these things is now the secret's out of the bag. But it's a very fun and yet also very potent and varied choice, and perhaps your flex spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I would be surprised running against Cradily if I hadn't seen your article, but I mean, there's just so much information out there. So even if you're someone who pours in all the videos and articles and all the write-ups about, you know, your tournament experiences, people are bound to miss stuff. So Cradily, the odds that someone knows a Cradily matchup versus perhaps a Vigoroth matchup, or you know, the odds are in favor of that Cradily for sure. It does lose to Vigoroth though, which is a downer for grass type, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, because of its rock typing, it is weak to fighting. So yeah, it doesn't really stand a chance against Vigoroth. Even though it beats up a lot of the birds, the really tanky ones like Noctowl can still take it out. It can beat a lot of things in all the different typing categories in the meta. So yeah, a lot of things lose to Vigoroth. This does too, but it's got some really unique kind of niche uses.
Interesting. Polymers, I think you're on now. I'd like to say that I included Meganium in this infographic. I might have just put it as an honorable mention in if I had to do this all over again, but with that being said, it is a very bulky grass type, a very popular freestyle pick, and inevitably people are going to use it if it's available. So, is there any play? Do you see any viable plays with Meganium in this meta?
Yeah, I think one advantage that Meganium has over Venusaur and Ivysaur, which it's frequently compared to, is that it has a better Magneton and Magnezone matchup. It's able to it's a little bulkier, and definitely in the no shields, that Earthquake can be a powerful charge move. But in addition to that, we were talking about Executor earlier, and Meganium has a much better Executor matchup as well. It's able to tie Executor consistently, which is much better than Venusaur or Ivysaur or even Victory Bell could manage, for that matter. So I think those are the two big matchups where Meganium has a slight edge.
Yeah, that Earthquake is really nice to have, but in the case of some of its other matchups, it would be really nice if it had a poison move like Sludge Bomb or something like that. But I love Meganium in Freestyle. I mean, Freestyle, it's been awesome, but here it just seems like it's overshadowed because the second you concentrate the meta to these few picks, Venusaur just beats it, so why would you bring it? So
yeah.
So,
I agree.
Would you see yourself bringing it in certain team comps?
No, I wouldn't. I definitely thought about it. Initially I thought Magneton and Magnezone were going to be much more popular. It seems like Lantern is a pretty popular electric choice, at least early on. And then, definitely you see Alolan, Golem, and Graveler quite a bit. And so I think all that would point to one of the grass poisons being a stronger option, and Meganium's, differential matchups aren't really common enough to really, warrant running it.
Right. One of the questions that's recurring on our Twitch chat is about the value of Razor Leaf users. I suppose it's specifically Victory Bell is the central argument to the Razor Leaf, but there's other options there like Blossom or even Weepin' Bell. I'm going to put Choost on the spot and say, what would be your best argument for running a Razor Leaf user here in the Jungle Cup meta?
I would say the biggest reason I've considered a Razor Leaf user is the core that I think it was Gotts was also talking about that I've been using too. Heracross and Rock Boy core is really strong, and Heracross can just edge out Venusaur, but a Razor Leafer will beat it, I'm pretty sure. It's become one of the few things that can actually take out that core right there.
Even though Heracross resists Razor Leaf, it's just very frail, right? So that Razor
And you're
Leaf kind of
resisting the
tends to
counters back
overextend it.
if you have Victory Bell.
Yeah. That's interesting. Are you running Victory Bell yourself?
I really, really love Victory Bell and ran it in Rainbow, and it was a horrible mistake with my team comps, so I'm really hesitant to jump back in a second time, but it's definitely in consideration, yeah.
It is a fun one to use, because you just don't know what's coming. Leaf Blade, it's got sort of that reverse relationship of shield baiting. You want to be shielded against a higher energy move with Acid Spray, but you could also be running Sludge Bomb and just doing a ton of damage, so you just don't know what's going to happen when a Victory Bell hits that charge move. I'll just open this up to the group. Any other Razor Leaf users that you guys have been considering? I know Caleb tossed around the idea of a Blossom. Is that true? Am I remembering that right? I think Caleb might have jumped off, but any other Razor Leaf users? I know Gots, you ran a Blossom for Rainbow, right?
Yeah, and I loved Blossom in Rainbow. There were a lot of times I missed Venusaur, but there was a lot of times I was able to 2v1 because of the heavy water composition in Rainbow. Here, the lack of counter damage, and Blossom really isn't the most offensive Razor Leafer. It's more of a defensive Razor Leafer. I just don't see it doing much damage. It's kind of hard to fit it in. I think Victory Bell or Weeping Bell are your two main Razor Leaf options, or Torterra.
Torterra. What niche do you see Torterra carving in this meta?
Torterra basically hard walls the electrics. There's not much they can do about them. Even Magnezone, double flash cannon, doesn't get it, because I think Torterra can KO before the flash cannon comes out the second time. So whereas Venusaur and Victory Bell, they can lose to Magnezone. They can lose to energy farmed Graveler. They can even potentially lose to Lantern, because Lantern's Hydro Pump does 50% to Venusaur. It's insane. But Torterra just tanks all the electrics and just doesn't care. I don't know if it's the strongest pick, because it loses way hard to bugs, and it doesn't. I think it does beat Vig. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. Quartz, if you're on the PV Poke, see what the Vigoroth against Torterra matchup looks like. I'm kind of interested to see Torterra myself, because it's one of those that just falls short because its charge moves take so much energy, and that's normally a death sentence combined with Razor Leaf, which is very low on energy gain. Very interested to see how the
Vigoroth has Scratch.
Oops.
Oh yeah, you're running Scratch on Vigoroth. How dare you?
Even counter
wins.
Torterra beats Vigoroth if it has a shield. And it doesn't care about. But Torterra's at 4 HP, so it's basically going to fire Stone Edge off and die. But as long as you have one shield, you always beat Vigoroth.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's what's so sort of infuriating about the Razor Leaf users, is that you're not able to shield anything from them because that Razor Leaf damage just goes through. On the flip side, it's very low on shield pressure, which seems to be a huge deal in this particular meta, with Vigoroth, the electric types being quite spammy, some of the bug types being pretty spammy as well. So
while we're on the topic of Torterra, there's a question about Grotle. But the difference is that Grotle doesn't have that second typing in ground, huh?
Right. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I think Grotle has better charge move. What was that?
Grotle does have Body Slam.
Yeah. So that's the advantage of Grotle. But I guess if Grotle was shared the ground typing that Torterra has, it'd be much better with that Body Slam combo, because it's so low energy. you'd be able to hit for neutral against a lot, and we might be talking about Grottle more in this particular meta, but I don't know that Body Slam is enough to make up for it without that secondary ground typing, which is kind of what Torterra has going for it anyway. So.
And we also have a question about. Okay, never mind. We haven't talked about Lantern yet. Never mind. We have a few questions on YouTube. Just trying to.
Oh, we will definitely get to the electrics. Right now, we're moving our way on to bug types. Any other grass questions?
One more razor lever I can toss out real quick.
Oh, please.
Has ancient power.
I'm sorry, who?
Bayleaf.
Bayleaf.
Oh,
There we go.
Bayleaf.
Ooh.
Now that doesn't necessarily
Bayleaf is
translate.
interesting.
That doesn't always translate to wins against flying or bug like you would hope, but it definitely beats the tar out of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for those of you who play draft much, Bayleaf is a very interesting pick on drafts, of like 10 plus players or so, because you can pick it late game and people normally don't expect it. And I believe it has Leaf Blade, but it also has that ancient power for coverage.
Grass knot.
Very, very nice. Grass knot, that's right, grass knot.
Yeah, if Bayleaf had
and grass
Leaf
knot hits
Blade,
hard.
it'd be amazing.
Yeah. All right. So if there's no further grass questions, I guess we can move on to one of my favorite subtypings is bug flying. I know initially this category was like way higher in the ranks when we were talking about dissecting this meta, because it was able to counter the other bug types while it also had really good simulations against Vigoroth. But because of this update from Kakuna, we kind of saw that those matches now might be like really, really close, or bait dependent, or even IV dependent in some cases. So I'll just open this up to JRE. We have Yanmega and Yanma, right? If we were to pit them against each other, who takes the cake here? Who's able to make a slot for your team? JRE, are you there?
I'm sorry, I had to get up for a quick second. What was the question?
It's all good. Yanmega versus Yanma. Who would make a slot in your team?
So I prefer Yanma just slightly because it has Silver Wind over Bug Buds, which Yanmega is stuck with. And Ancient Power is the preferred charge moves. The one fun little thing about that is that it has two moves that can potentially boost it. Both quick hitting moves, which is good considering the frailty of Yanma and Yanmega. So Bug Buzz is certainly powerful on Yanmega when you're able to pull it off, but the slower charge on it means you're sometimes going to be left with energy that you just can't use in time.
So Yanma happens to be one of those that you need a perfect level 40, right? So it's a very, very expensive pick unless you happen to get.
That's the other downside. Yeah, Yanma needs to be maxed out. It gets close to 1500, not quite.
Yeah.
Get a lucky one, that might be the best way to go. But yes, it's definitely not a thrifty option, shall we say.
Yeah, thrifty. Yeah, it's more of a. Is it nifty? Is that what you use for the expensive picks?
They're definitely nifty. But and Yanmega you can get pretty cheap. I think it needs to be. If I recall, it's the upper teens or the low 20s. As far as level, you can get one that's rated the right size. But yeah, Yanma would need to be maxed. Not everybody can do that. I couldn't do that.
For sure. We do have a comparison on screen of the Yanma and Yanmega stats. For comparison, Yanma seems to be a little bit bulkier in practice because it has 20 more HP. At the expense of only 10, well, a little bit more than 10 less defense, and then it's got only 2 attack less than Yanma. So very, very comparable stats between Yanma and Yanmega.
Yeah,
it
the
just
only real
really
big
boils
difference
down to the
is
moves.
versus Bug Buzz, right? That's really the only big difference.
Yeah. I gotta say, I've been like a huge fan of Masquerain, even though it's kind of like on the chopping block for my team, because although I like it a lot, it seems to not straight up counter the stuff that it should be countering, and it offers the threat of like a potential boost.
I don't know.
And so Yanma kind of has the same thing going for it.
Masquerain kind of sweeps AJ's team.
Oh, my team?
Yeah, remember that one time?
What's
in
my
scrimmages,
team?
We were testing around and you just got swept by Masquerain after a boost.
Oh, I don't remember. That might have
was
been
like
with my
Day
previous
2,
team. I don't know.
Day 3.
Oh
It
yeah.
was we were blind testing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's right, because you brought a Masquerain and then it got a boost, and then you beat me basically because I was bringing 2 counter users and no straight up counter to Masquerain, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, you were like heavy counter, heavy grass, heavy bug. It just
Yeah.
didn't work out very well.
AJ's blocked out that memory.
No,
To be fair,
it's
I
now
was-
all flooding back into me, and it's giving me PTSD, and now I realize why I immediately invested in my own Masquerain, which has been fun to use, to say the least.
Yeah, I
so
liked it
Gots, you are on the Masquerain team. I've just assigned you to that. And
enough.
Choost, you're on the Scyther team. You
That'd be
guys have to
Scyther.
duke it out. Debate your point. I'll start with you, Gots. And you just give your pitch for Masquerain. Choost will give his pitch for Scyther, and we'll see who comes out winning in this. Gots, you go first with your Masquerain pitch.
Sure. I like Masquerain. It's cheap to unlock the second move. It's only another 10,000 dust. It's not terribly high to get up because it's usually like level 20 something. But it doesn't do very well versus Vigoroth in 2 shields. It does great 1 shield and does even better 0 shields.
Mm-hmm.
And it really struggles against Fortress, which is one of the reasons why I dropped it early, because I thought Fortress was still going to be a major thing. And now with Fortress coming back, Masquerain is kind of iffy there too. But as far as basically being a flyer that isn't Noctile, Masquerain's just, it's fun to use. Air Slash charges Silver Wind and Ominous Wind very quickly. Hits very hard, even with the subpar moves that Silver Wind and Ominous Wind are for charge moves. And you just kind of erase the bugs that it can come in against.
That's true. Quartz by accident brought in a Infestation Masquerain, and we discovered Infestation has just higher energy gain, and that's what it had going for it. But it actually did better than if he had had Air Slash in that particular match, which kind of was interesting. All right, Choost. Scyther. Why should we pick Scyther over Masquerain?
I gotta dig deep for this one because I really don't like Scyther in this meta, to be honest. That entire set of 4, I don't plan on touching, and if any of them, it would be Masquerain actually.
Okay, we're convinced. Scyther is the best.
Hold on. Let me make a case for Scyther. Scyther is not as bad as the Sims say it is.
Wow.
Because a lot of times it wants to X Scissor immediately. Versus Vigoroth, you will win every time if you wait for the second body slam and piggyback into 2 aerial aces.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a convincing win. You can switch in and beat max product Vigoroth with a default Scyther.
With
I'm
the
gonna
bait
go
or
with what he said
without?
then.
There's no bait. It's just double aerial ace. You'll do it.
Nice. Okay. So, Quartz, do we have a voting option yet on Twitch, or is that functionality not yet available?
I can try to get it set up. You guys can continue the conversation, and I'll let you know when I have that ready.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I'm going to give my opinion, the real winner here is Scyther, just from this discussion, and the losers maybe Choose Master since he ditched it so quickly. If you guys have any comments, please bring them in the chat. We always welcome them. Any other bug flying picks aside from Vespiquen, which is kind of in a different category? that you guys think would be really viable within this group?
No, the bug flying is kind of on. It's in iffy category to begin with because the meta has really shifted away from heavy bug back into the electric and fortress and whatnot. If Executor becomes a thing, I definitely see Scyther or Masquerade being the better bug because it does just nuke.
Yeah, I've foregone Scyther just because of exactly what you said, that it doesn't do awesome in the matchups that it should be really filling, and Masquerade is just cheaper to use to see how, get a feel for it. I will say getting that boost is so satisfying, and I would hate to be losing a tournament match because of a boost, and I'd feel maybe a little bit sleazy for winning one because of a boost, but that it would pass pretty quickly, I think. One question in the chat was Tristan T. Wastel was pitching Scyther. Yes, Balls of Steel, he was advocating for Scyther. I think we all were at some point, because it was simming really well, and then with the update it wasn't simming as awesome as it was. The thing to watch out about Scyther mainly is that once you get into switches and counter switches and energy advantages, it starts to really get iffy with these bug flying types. We'll move on to normal flying, unless you guys have any other ones to bring up. Jimma Banks is mentioning Scissor. I think we'll definitely cover that in the bugs, specifically when we talk about Fortress. We'll move on to normal flying, otherwise known as the Angry Birds. We got Pidgeot and Noctowl. Personally, I'm trying to forego this category in my team of 6. I'm trying to see if I can fill that role by maybe doubling up on Electric. So I'll give this to the group. Am I crazy? Just go ahead and roast me if I am.
Yeah, you're crazy.
Why?
Yeah, a little bit.
Noctowl or Pidgeot, they're just really good for beating both the grass types and the bug types. The electrics can't really do that. Like, they don't really have the grass types, right? If you'd forego Noctowl, this is going to be like Scyther or something, but then you just end up being weaker to Noctowl as a result. So
yeah, I guess my thing is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What's that about Noctowl?
Was just a flying tank. Even in bad matchups, it just
great.
has so much bulk. It just does not go down quickly.
Honey Badger of the cup.
I've liked Noctowl in freestyle, but I think it's just kind of a knee-jerk reaction of having a flying type that doesn't beat your main counter user that rubs me the wrong way. So what's the major selling point besides that it's a flying tank? Because I know that already. What does Noctowl do? And I'll just open this up to the group. Whoever wants to take this, go ahead.
Perfect partner.
That nobody else can do. Perfect partner to Vigoroth.
Duo together, it's pretty much uncontested by everything but one pick.
Okay, what's that one pick?
Lowland Raichu.
I think you might have broken up there.
The only thing that can properly check both, and it's just a check to Vigoroth, so you still have some advantage there, is a Lowland Raichu.
Yeah, a Lowland Raichu. I've heard some rumbling that Pidgeot might actually be able to beat Vigoroth and Noctowl in some situations, right?
Like that before, like a check to Vigoroth, but since the Sim shakeup, it seems to look like any Vigoroth that's closer to ideal, not even like top 100, just like closer to ideal, will out-edge the Pidgeot. It'll depend on like baits and landing a Brave Bird, right?
So, all right, I think previously...
Sorry,
what's
AJ.
going on, Quartz?
I actually managed to figure out the poll, and I have it live on the stream screen as well. I'm not sure exactly what question you were trying to ask earlier, but I just put a test question for the best bug flyer between Masquerade, Scyther, and Yen Mega. But yeah, moving forward,
Okay.
if you have any polls that you want me to pull up, I'm ready to do it. So
Sure. We actually have one coming up.
okay,
We'll do a Noctowl versus Pidgeot because
Okay.
I'm gonna pit two of our guests against each other. They're all trembling right now, wondering who it's gonna be because none of them have been prepared for it.
Y'all not
so it's
voting
gonna
for
be
Scyther hurt my soul.
so I'm actually looking, and
Yeah.
unfortunately the YouTube votes aren't going through. I apologize again, YouTube viewers. It's all the tools that I happen to have on Streamlabs OBS just doesn't seem to be
Yeah.
very YouTube friendly. But
It's not that we don't like you,
yeah.
YouTube. It's that the world doesn't. So you should join Twitch and just join the dark
I'm
side.
sorry, YouTubers. But okay,
Yeah.
so I think just this test vote itself for Masquerain, Scyther, and Mega and Yenma, it's pretty clear that Masquerain is a fan favorite.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the polls would be. Masquerain against Scyther, but probably all the Yan Mega guys would just go to Masquerain, and Scyther would get. Oh, looks like it's getting a couple of votes right now. So
Well, for the
Uh,
next,
Doesn't Scyther beat Masquerain?
what's that?
Doesn't Scyther beat Masquerain?
It's a tie.
Yeah, it is a tie.
so in terms of the
Yeah.
next poll question, it'll be Noctowl and Pidgeot. Am I right?
Yeah, Noctowl and Pidgeot.
So I'll set that up, and,
and
you
so
guys
what I'm.
you guys can continue the discussion. Yeah.
Hey
alright,
guys, so,
what I'm.
while he's setting that up, AJ, who wants to settle the debate of Psychic versus Nightshade on Noctowl?
I got a
Ooh.
case for one of those.
Well, hold on, because you're gonna be arguing for Noctowl, JRE.
Okay.
You can definitely argue the case for Nightshade or Psychic in your pitch for Noctowl. Choose to Master, you're gonna be advocating for Pidgeot, and since
You just
JRE,
keep
you were
giving me all these
chomping-
power picks.
Yeah, well, that's what you get for being a quarter finalist. So you can just eat it with French fries, right? JRE, you got Noctowl. You're up. Give us your pitch. Why should we pick Noctowl over Pidgeot?
So, the one big thing going for it again is just greater bulk. Its moves are slightly slower than Pidgeot, just because Pidgeot gets Aerial Ace. But when it hits, its moves hit hard. I mean, Sky Attack is obviously the best flying charge move you can have. Pidgeot does not have that. It beats a whole slew of things. I mean, the only things you really need to worry about are Electric, Vigoroth. And the other thing it has going for it, Pidgeot is stuck with only flying moves. Good ones, albeit, but only flying moves. In case where Nightshade in particular makes a difference, and that's against Magneton and Magnezone. It actually deals like 15 more damage using a Nightshade as opposed to in that case. So that would also be the one move I would recommend, because Psychic, probably some edge cases where if you're able to land one, great, it'll do some big damage. But Psychic versus Sky Attack, I think always going to take Sky Attack. Nightshade at least has a case where it is notably more useful.
Okay. All right. That's pretty solid there, Choost. I'll give it to you. The floor is yours. Argue for Pidgeot, please.
All right. Well, I think the biggest thing that's in Pidgeot's favor is, like you're saying, the faster moves. You have more when you're stuck in a sticky situation. You're more likely to get off that last little extra bit of damage. Swing a lot of matchups. Those little extra bits of chunking away at something before your thing goes down, if it's already done its job, can make a big difference in the long run. There's actually some interesting cases where Hurricane can do some extra work. I think it beats Vigo in the Zero Shield with Hurricane. So in late game situations, it could have some applications. I am really digging at the bottom though. I ruled Pidgeot out pretty early for Noctowl.
Mm-hmm. And this is Wing Attack, right? So it would be the Legacy Flex in this case.
I guess that
And,
flex is
hopefully-
also biggest thing that you have
Yeah.
going for you, and your flowing locks and your Pidgeot. But
People are calling it the Bird Jesus, so it's got that going for it. I don't think you're doing any favors for it at this point. Noctowl is in a solid lead.
It definitely
We'll give it
is.
a few
The bird Jesus
minutes.
meme actually comes from the Twitch Plays Pokemon playthrough a few years back. So I'm not sure if anyone here is familiar with that, but there was a run
Legendary.
of the first generation game where Twitch chat, decides up, down, left, right, A and B, basically deciding how to play a run of Pokemon through Twitch chat. So we've got thousands at the beginning, and you hit hundreds of thousands, and Pidgeot was truly Jesus and carried the run pretty well. There's a lot of memes that come from that stream as well, but Bird Jesus is one of it. But unfortunately, he's not gonna do very well in this jungle.
We got a couple follows during this. Thank you, Corbin, and thank you, Kaiser Niner, again for your generous bits. He's saying Noctowl Pidgeot, just to seal the deal.
He wants to vote
like,
twice.
13 votes for the flying normal poll, and we got 85% in favor of Noctowl. So not looking good for Pidgeot. It will have some play. And you do need to watch out for those matchups, but it looks like most people are going to prefer Noctowl. We won't do a case study on whether those people are just bitter because they don't have the legacy. It's possible, though.
Pidgeot used to be Noctowl under the old PV Poke Sims. That's now flip-flopped.
Oh, no,
Right.
it still does.
Oh.
You just have to land a Brave Bird, and then you have 2 Aerial Aces, so as long as you put one of those into a shield. Marginal win, it's like 8 HP or something, but it still does have that. And its Figure-Off matchup is slightly better. But
Right. So it does need to bait, basically, right? Is what you're
you got to
saying.
land one of those Aerial Aces. But it was weird because I was looking at it, and I tried to mess around and shield the Brave Bird, and then let Noctowl take 2 Aerial Aces, and I still managed to win. So I'm not sure what was going on.
Which charge move aside from Aerial Ace would you be running, Hurricane or Brave Bird on Pidgeot?
I think Brave Bird because that's the one that lets it beat Noctowl and gives it a better Vigoroth matchup.
Okay.
An
Yeah,
attack-weighted
much, but-
Pidgeot will also win versus Noctowl as well.
Yeah.
What's the
'Cause it
other
gets, I
one
think,
that's
5
just a
wins.
garbage charge move that's happens to be legacy? It's like aerial
Cutter.
something, I
Yeah,
forget.
there's way too many.
Air Cutter.
There's
Hair
Hair
Cutter.
Cutter.
Oh yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
garbage.
Nobody wants Hair Cutter. It's like the one that you would TM even if it's legacy.
Doesn't even hurt.
Yeah.
It's almost as awful
Okay.
as Water Pulse.
Oh
Oh,
god.
how dare you? Okay, so I guess we'll move on to bugs. I don't see any questions relevant to the normal flying types. I promise you guys asking questions about like Venomoth and the Scissor and all those. We're going to be covering them right now. So we're going
Yeah.
on to the
I'm-
bug types unless you guys have
I was
anything.
thinking about Nightshade and Psychic.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I saw someone say it in the chat actually, but
Mhm.
Magneton, Alolan Raichu is one where you'd actually want that Nightshade. Chunks it pretty well.
Right.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Personally, I'm preferring Nightshade in my Noctowl scrims.
So me as well. Like I see
but
mainly the
I
benefit
could see
is
an argument.
I've
Yeah,
seen some
being
Noctowl
nimble.
mirrors where having the ability to hit that Psychic gives you that extra little bit at the end, but that's just about the only situation where I would have wanted Psychic over Nightshade.
Yeah.
sometimes usually I'd probably prefer like the double sky attack though, not want to waste that energy.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's a very, very edge case that it actually swings it because it's marginally more damage.
Hmm.
I think it helps versus Lantern a bit more too.
We do have a poll going up. Noctowl second charge with Sky Attack, Psychic or Nightshade, and we'll see what the group chat prefers. Honestly, I think most of us here, the consensus is Nightshade, so I'd be shocked if the chat goes with Psychic. I just think that Psychic is something to watch out for if you're an Alolan Golem user. to not just get too confident. Someone might be running anti-meta there, but we'll see. We'll move on to bug types, and I'll mention the poll results in a few minutes once you guys get a chance to vote. Type 1 or 2 in the chat and pick your poison. Within the bug types, we all decided really to split the bug flying and the bug types into 2 categories, mainly because, yeah, they both beat the grass types, but they have slightly different matchups against the counter users. I'd say the bug types within this subgroup have a better matchup against Vigoroth, except Fortress. Fortress loses to Vigoroth because of the neutral damage from counter. That being said, Fortress is ranked number 1 on PvPoke, so I thought it was very necessary to put it within this group, since it still beats grass and it beats a lot within this subgroup, and it sort of fit pretty well with it, with the exception of the counter users. Gots. That being said, being number 1 on PvPoke, many chose it within our preliminary jungle lineup. What's the best argument in favor of Fortress?
Fortress is a lot like Vig, where it doesn't lose any fight very badly.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely tanky, and it beats every bug, except possibly Vespiquen, depending on Fortress's moveset. And it does moderately well versus even Vigoroth. In fact, Vigoroth cannot switch in to Fortress because Fortress can double heavy slam and KO. So that's a huge win for Fortress, where a lot of people think that Vigoroth just beats Fortress outright. It's not. It's ready to go. And actually, a lot of its matchups, you can see the energy gain is just right there. So a little bit of energy on Fortress, and suddenly that matchup flips.
What moves on Fortress? Kaiser Niner is asking this in chat.
I am partial to Earthquake and Heavy Slam. Heavy Slam is necessary. Like, you cannot play Fortress this cup without Heavy Slam, because you need the speed and you need the neutral damage. It hits everything hard enough for what you need to do. All the bugs can just get double Heavy Slammed and taken out, except for Vespiquen. Vespiquen is the only one that I know of that needs Rock Tomb. And it's your fastest option versus Vigoroth. It is slightly weaker versus Noctowl, but Noctowl is a losing fight no matter what you do. Like, there's just not a whole lot of ways to win versus Noctowl for Fortress. And versus your grass, I mean, it's basically just additional tack on damage after Bug Bite. Just eats through everything.
Yeah.
And without Earthquake, you are a sitting duck to the electrics. Like, Lantern will farm you every day of the week if you're Gok Tomb Heavy Slam. And Magnezone, same thing. You have no way to threaten Magnezone without Earthquake. You have no way to really threaten Golem or Graveler. Raichu kind of kills you before you can get a second move off. So you need a heavy energy advantage to beat Raichu. So it's just, Rock Tomb is too slow, and 90% of the time when you Rock Tomb, you'll either massively overkill because it's a bug flying, you'll overkill anyways because it's a bug and you dealt enough residual damage, or you're just not going to do enough damage to your would-be counters.
Sure. Yeah, it's an interesting. I ran Heavy Slam Rock Tomb in Rainbow. There's definitely situations where I was like really happy to have Rock Tomb, and then other situations where I was really really bummed out that I didn't have Earthquake. But there was never a situation where I wish I didn't have Heavy Slam here, because it's so useful for the shield baiting potential and just neutral damage against a lot. So,
well, on paper, Heavy Slam is better than Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb only outpaces Heavy Slam if it's super effective, and really only does better if it's doubly super effective.
Right.
So versus the bug flying, that's when Rock Tomb will be great, but you'll obliterate them. Like, even Vespiquen can't take a Rock Tomb. It just dies. So in Rainbow, Rock Tomb was necessary to stop Fortress, because you could, or not Fortress, Charizard. Like you needed Rock Tomb to just nuke Charizard, because otherwise Charizard farmed you all day. And
Right.
with
So, Quartz, I believe our poll must have gone in with the previous poll. The moveset, the winning moveset was, I think, Nightshade, along with Sky
Yes.
Attack. Yeah.
By 53
And we
to
have another
47. It was a very, very
Oh.
small margin, yes. 53 to
Wow,
47
very close.
on the Nightshade to Psychic, yes. And then now we
That's
have
very
another
surprising.
question about the Fortress moveset, and we'll see how this goes. It's nice that you have a chance to make an argument for each of the movesets before the polls, so we'll see if we manage to convince anyone on which moveset is the best for the Jungle Cup.
Anybody here want to argue for a non-heavy slam moveset? Perhaps Rock Tomb Earthquake?
That's the one I have at the
Rainbows.
moment, but yeah.
Oh, but Quartz, I think it's just out of laziness, right? That's what you evolved it to.
No, I actually did change it because that was the set that I was using in Rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't decided whether I want to change it for the jungle yet.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, that seems to be winning right now, the Rock Tomb Earthquake. A lot of people seem to favor it, in spite of Gott's in-depth analysis about why Heavy Slam is very, very useful. So
I think
we'll see
people
what Twitch comes with.
overvalue Rock Tomb's strength versus the bugs.
Yeah.
I think they just look at it on paper that Rock Tomb can KO bugs, but there's a lot of overkill there, and there's a lot of energy wasted. Whereas Heavy Slam will just finish off every bug but Vespiquen. So if Vespiquen becomes a bigger threat, I could see Rock Tomb, but if Vespiquen is nowhere, it's definitely Heavy Slam all the way. There's just no reason to have Rock Tomb.
JR Honda in chat is also mentioning Stab, which Rock Tomb would not have. Neither would Earthquake in this situation, but Heavy Slam. It's one of the few moves it has that would offer Stab. We will move on, and then I'll revisit this poll in a few minutes, see what our Twitch audience has to say about the movesets. JRE, you have Beedrill to talk about. I've been a huge fan of Beedrill. All of its movesets are interesting. Mostly people are using Poison Jab as the fast move. I don't see much argument to be using Legacy Bug Bite. But that said, I'm sure someone will. I think most of the time people are using Sludge Bomb because it's really good damage per energy. The real debate comes in play with Aerial Ace versus X Scissor. What's your opinion? Which one would you use?
So mine currently has X Scissor and Sludge Bomb. And yes, Poison Jab is the fast move. There are some advantages to Aerial Ace. It's not that much slower than X Scissor. It still comes out fast enough to allow it to beat, say, Vigoroth, for instance. X Scissor or Aerial Ace as much as you can until Vigoroth goes down. Certainly, Aerial Ace, just by typing, is going to be better against bugs. Drill into that kind of a role. For X Scissor, just because it's a little easier to bait with that, you can. It's I believe 10 energy cheaper than Aerial Ace. I don't remember offhand. I'd have to look it up, but it's one of the fastest moves in the game by far. I say baiting with it. What I like to do is charge it up to where I could fire a larger move, and then fire off the X Scissor. Not just use it right away. Everyone's going to know it's coming at that point. But it charges so fast you can fire one or two of those off and then land a larger move later. The Sludge Bomb and just devastate. Smogon Devo was actually making the case for Aerial Ace a while ago. He's still on that or not, and I hate to kind of put him under the lights. But if he wants to talk to that, he looked into it more in depth than I did.
I don't hate
Yeah.
putting him under the lights. So Smogon, please.
Yeah, I looked at
Aerial
it.
Ace, you still on that?
No, not anymore. I think both are definitely viable, though. It really just depends on the team. Like, better off versus bugs in the mirror. But on the teams I happen to run when I'm using Beedrill, I'm a little bit more worried about the electrics for X-Scissor, especially versus like a Lowland Raichu, which I found myself weak to on certain teams. It just really depends on the role you need your Beedrill to fill.
Mm-hmm. So the poll results are in on Fortress. Looks like the one that we favored the least is the winning one within Twitch. So a little controversial moveset on Fortress. I think that just... Oh, by the way, that is a Rock Tomb Earthquake got 50% of the votes. Heavy Slam Earthquake is 40%, and then we got 10% for the Rock Tomb Heavy Slam, which is what I'm currently using. Not necessarily because I want to, but just because I don't want to use TMs on Fortress at the moment. But maybe I had an influence in this and that people just wanted to roast me for using it. So Rock Tomb Earthquake is what wins here, and I think that just really goes to show that all of Fortress moves are viable and something to look out for. So,
well, also one other thing for Rock Tomb Earthquake that's a favor for it is Fortress, like one of its biggest roles we saw in Rainbow, obviously, is straight farming a grass and then hit whatever comes in.
Right.
And so Heavy Slam, even though if it's like from 0, it's going to do the job against the bugs, and something swaps in, that's where having that Rock Tomb that can just suddenly like take something out in one shot can be really useful.
I don't know, but when would a bug switch into Fortress?
I mean, if it's pivot into the close and you're playing that dancing game where you're trying to avoid each other's counters, you just get through their thing with the Fortress, you launch that one charge attack. There were definitely a lot of times in Rainbow, at least, where my Fortress was doing one last nuke before it died. And having that Rock Tomb Earthquake kind of guarantees you have the best nuke option. I don't know if I would lean that move.
Already the best nuke option, and you could probably get 2 Heavy Slams off if you have that much farm from a grass. Like, that's my whole problem. Is like you're trading.
I mean, Rock Tomb is only 10 more energy than Heavy Slam. You're not going to get
right, but if in late games, if they're weakened, Heavy Slam finishes. If it's a bug and Rock Tomb would do more damage, Heavy Slam still finishes because they're so weak. Like, it's overkill 90% of the time.
Very controversial. I know Gots is not the person you want to be on the other end of when it comes to debating movesets, because he definitely studies them a lot. I don't think we'll be able to settle this here because I've been in this argument before of what the best Fortress moveset is. So we will move on. Choost, you're up. Psychic on Venomoth. I've had a lot of people ask me this. When would you really miss Poison Fang?
I mean, the biggest thing is obviously the shield baiting opportunities. It just makes a lot of your matchups a lot easier when you can throw that bait out. The biggest thing you're missing is, I believe, you need Poison Fang for the 2 shield win versus Vigoroth. That is definitely a thing where you want if you're bringing it, you want it to be a much more harder counter, and you need Poison Fang to fully be that counter to Vigo.
So the legacy moveset takes the cake, but when would you want Psychic?
I mean, it is still it's always nice, especially when I would almost want it paired with having the nuke with a baity option, because then you're much more likely to land the Psychic. And I kick as the lowest of the 3, but would rather run it with Poison Fang than with Silverwind.
Oh, interesting. So Poison Fang Psychic instead of Silverwind, huh?
I mean, if I didn't have, I would still run Poison Fang Silverwind first. So if I had Poison Fang, I wouldn't be running Psychic. And I would probably go to one of the other bug options if I didn't have Poison Fang personally. Interesting thing is, I know a lot of people talk about, is Dustox a good enough swap in? And I haven't actually play tested with it. It is a lot tankier, so you might still get to the Sludge Bombs even though it's slower. I personally, for things like confusion users, I prefer the attack weighted ones because you want to make sure you're trying to kill that thing with fast moves before it can get off a charge move back at you. So that's why I favor things like Victory Bell, for example, as my Razor Leafers.
Yeah.
I
And
shy
Dust
away
Ox-
from Dustox and the price. honestly.
Dustox does need to be level 40 perfect, basically,
Yeah, exactly.
to get the most, the biggest bang out of your buck, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I know I at least have a lucky trade lined up. A friend of mine is generous enough to have maxed out a Dustox and double moved it. Not that the double move really costs a lot, but the maxing out is pretty nice. So once we get lucky, I'll be getting a battle-ready Dustox, so I'm excited for that. But I think I agree. Venomoth is better, mostly in this role, at least within this meta. Polymers. I'd like to give you the floor to talk about Vespiquen. Sell me on it. What's the role that Vespiquen has within this meta?
Yeah, I mean, I really like Vespiquen. Unfortunately, I haven't tested one yet because I don't have one, but there's a lot to like in terms of its matchups. So one thing that made the write-up, which I think is just a really cool, a really interesting note, is that Vespiquen is actually the only non-counter or non-Razor Leaf user that can defeat Vigoroth in a 1-2 shield disadvantage. Everything else that can beat Vigoroth in a 1-2 shield disadvantage either runs counter or Razor Leaf because those body slams are just really tough to deal with. And I think that's pretty big. I think that speaks to Vespiquen's ability to even switch in late to Vigoroth in like a counter switch lead scenario and still easily win that matchup.
Yeah, there's probably a sweet spot as far as like how much energy you want that Vigoroth to have versus, how much HP it has. Once it's below a certain threshold, Vespiquen will just be able to beat it one way or another. But I suppose if it has enough energy advantage, Vigoroth would certainly be a problem. Even more so if it had an energy advantage. I mean, a shield advantage.
Right. And then having Power Gem is pretty useful too against some of the other bugs. So it's able to beat Dustox and then Venomoth with a bait as well with that Power Gem.
Right. Power Gem, a lot of the sims rely on baits, I think, with X-Scissor, right? So you just don't want to be landing an unshielded X-Scissor if you're going for a Power Gem against a specific matchup, like something that's really, really weak to rock, right?
Right. Dustox is one where it can actually double Power Gem in the one shield.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Anybody else? Actually, there was one question on Twitch about Scizor, which I had to kind of take note of, and we'll bring it into the forefront here. I've seen Scizor as sort of like a glassy alternative to Fortress, but has anybody been able to scrim at all against or with it and feel comfortable with, gauging the temperature on Scizor in this meta?
I actually faced one in my tourney, and I pretty much bodied it. Yeah. Nothing special. It's like Fortress for me already is kind of like borderline, and then Caesar just has less bulk, so it wasn't really scary where I faced it.
Yeah. That's definitely what I've been able to see in the Sims so far. Scizor is kind of like a just as expensive charge double moving as Fortress is. Yeah. And it's just less bulky, so I don't see like a huge reason to be running a Scizor over a Fortress.
The only advantage it has is that it can have double steel moves, which will deal neutral without anything. But yeah, that doesn't actually win it a lot of matchups.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think many matchups really want a steel fast move. I mean, Bullet Punch, I think it's Bullet Punch, right? Is what it has?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
give it Doom Desire.
It's not like it's doing so much. Yeah. poll Niantic, everybody just after the stream is done, just send an email to Niantic and say, give Scissor Doom Desire, because it's a really cool mon and I like my shiny. And I don't have a shiny, but I'm sure you guys do. And just say, hey, we need Doom Desire on Scissor, so it becomes meta relevant. With that being said, I think we'll move on to Electrics, unless there's any other questions that I might have missed, Quartz, from the chat.
I think we had a question a little earlier about that we've not talked about, is about Execute, but that's not exactly.
Execute?
Yeah, not Executor, but Execute. The question comes from YouTube.
I actually ran Sims with Execute once we started looking at Executor more last week, because I wanted to see if my lucky Execute could play. Unfortunately, it's the damage from Executor you want, and the bulk doesn't gain it anymore.
Fortunately.
Right. Because Execute is a little bit bulkier, but does less confusion damage, is basically
By
what it is.
quite a bit, like sizable amount of less confusion.
Yeah. While we sort of set up the premise for Electrics, Quartz, if you could show the difference on PvPoke of Execute and Executor, that would be nice. So just people tuning in can be able to see the difference in the actual stats. I think with that being said, we'll move on to Electrics. I have sort of an interesting... Oh, what's up?
Want to talk about Armaldo first, maybe?
Oh, Armaldo. Yeah, you had a pitch for Armaldo. So what's the scoop on Armaldo? I haven't been able to read your article yet.
Well, that's fine. So, yes, I was hoping it would actually win more matchups, but it does pretty consistently beat other bugs just because of the Rock Blast spam. It has Fury Cutter as the fast move, and then that charges up pretty quickly Rock Blast. And Cross Poison is the second move, although it doesn't do a ton for it. It's pretty good, especially the flying bugs with just Rock Blast after Rock Blast. Being part rock, it's a bug rock type. It does lose to Vigoroth. Half of it means it does lose to Noctowl, but it beats the crap out of a lot of stuff. Like Pidgeot, for example, it leaves with, I think, less than 10 hit points, or less than 20. With about 10 hit points, which is pretty good considering it's a bug. So, but my pitch for it mainly was that it's a pretty safe switch in. With its typing of bug rock, there are not very many things that are super effective against it. Tanky stats, but it just doesn't take a whole lot of damage from most of the meta, again, aside from counter from Vigoroth.
Yeah.
It's not a huge pitch for it, but it is a very safe kind of gap filler on a team. If you have some kind of glassy stuff, you can swap in an Armaldo to clean up just about anything. And if you're in a really bad spot, you can put it in and deal some significant damage in a swap in.
I guess that is the big problem, because Vigoroth is just so popular.
I'm actually kind of curious. Does anyone know if it beats Fortress?
The Noctowl against Fortress?
Oh no, the Armaldo.
Oh yeah, what about it?
Does anyone know if it beats Fortress?
No, it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, it falls just short against Fortress and Sizer.
It looks like it loses to Venusaur and Torterra and Victory Bell and both Rock Boys and Magneton and Lantern. And that's a lot that it's losing to. That's very meta relevant.
It does, but it leaves, like Venusaur, for example, it leaves it with 10 hit points. I mean, it's a loss. You certainly lose switch advantage. Like I said, it doesn't get the number of wins I would hope for, but it turned basically any matchup into a war of attrition. I mean, it just deals a ton of damage on its way out.
Your sim must be different than my sim, because my sim shows Venusaur wins with 34 HP, in the one shield.
I'll look
I
it
think
up
also
again.
one of the problems is that like when I'm looking for something like that role, like a safe swap, I want to, even if I'm losing, at least take shield advantage out of it, and it doesn't feel like Armaldo can push that. Like it still needs to go even shields, even to just barely lose.
Yes.
And so that's
I agree with that. It, like I said, it's not the most ringing endorsement, but it is a very interesting type. Typing means that there's not a lot that kills it off very quickly. So it's not one I personally am probably going to use, but if somebody has one and they want to try it out as a relatively option, it never really gets blown out.
Yeah.
It is an
I
option.
guess from this sort of tepid endorsement of it, I would say it's barely not in the trash can, but it might be in some situations, right?
I'd toss it in the trash can. It's
Ooh,
definitely trash
shots
can
fired.
material.
Shots fired at
It
Armaldo.
loses to the most meta of the meta. Like, that's not a good position to be in. And if you're taking it for the bug matchup, why are you not playing knocked out?
No,
Fortress.
Yeah, like you're still losing to the electrics. Like the only electric that you even go toe to toe with is Magnezone. You're losing to Ton, Raichu, Graveler, and Lantern. You're bodied by Vigoroth. You're destroyed by Razor Leaf. It's just, no, it's trash.
Well, so Armaldo, yeah, kind of like a point of discussion, but there is a lot of information. I know you, Jerry, posted a whole Under the Lights topic on it. So if you guys want to know more about those matchups, definitely go to his thread and click on those links. And within his articles, he does a pretty good job of showing the actual simulations that he's quoting. So you'll be able to see for yourself whether Armaldo is able to fill in the niche within your specific team. We will move on to electrics, though. Quartz, while we're sort of setting the premise up for electrics, I would like to set up a poll. Don't start the voting yet, just have it ready to go.
Okay.
All of the electrics within this subgroup, Alolan Graveler, Alolan Golem, Lantern, all of them, have them ready as options within the poll.
Sounds good.
And it's all of the people that are here today will have to argue their case for one of those electric types, and then we'll open the poll, and we'll see who wins. I will say within the electric subcategory, the practical non-existence of ground moves has been really nice. It's really pushed the electric types up. And I think save Torterra, nothing actually has a ground subtyping. I might be wrong on that specific note, but it is eligible to thrive within jungle. Similar to Vigoroth, but to, I guess, a lesser extent, they aren't truly walled by anything as a group. Individually, they are definitely walled by other things. I'll say that within the infographic, I put Alolan Raichu outside of the electric group. That's there's two reasons for that. Number one is initially Alolan Raichu didn't sim really well, and number two, later on, it didn't really match up with the same matchups that perhaps Kanto Raichu had. The matchup Alolan Raichu had with Lantern was a little bit more iffy and more shield bait dependent, and it doesn't necessarily lose to the counter users as much as, for example, Kanto Raichu would, because it resists counter. So Alolan Raichu is able to carve its niche out more because of its psychic typing. Or, in some situations it doesn't help it because of the prevalence of bug bite. So with that being said, I'll have a group sort of free for all. You'll each choose an electric type, and if you don't choose one, I'll choose it for you. And you'll be able to state your case on which one you get. And as is tradition, the person who ranked highest within the Sylph tournament will be able to choose last. So whatever scraps are left, choose to master, you'll have to argue for that. I'll
This
start
is punishment
with,
for all the times I get censored on the chat, isn't it?
This is right. That's exactly right. We'll start with Gots. Gots, what are you going to choose to argue for your electric champion?
I'm probably going to take Graveler.
Graveler? Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
JRE?
unless you consider Golem as separate. I mean, they're both.
Oh, they are separate. Yeah, they are going to be separate.
Then I'll take.
Yeah.
All right, I'll take Column then.
Okay, great. Let's see, Polymers.
I'll take Magnezone.
Okay. Let's see, who do we have? Smogon.
I guess I'll take Raichu.
Which one?
Alolan.
Kanto? I think you
Alolan.
were running. Oh, Alolan, okay. And Caleb.
Caleb is not here, but I think Choost can pick. Either
Yeah, Choost.
go for Lantern, then AJ has to argue for, Raichu.
Okay, so I will go for Magneton. And Choost, you're up.
Yeah, I'll take. Oh wait, Quartz, did you say you were taking Lantern?
No, you can pick.
Yeah, I mean, if Lantern's still open, I'll take Lantern.
And I'm not sure if Mason wants to add in because he just joined in. But if he wants to argue for Cantonian Raichu, that's the last one.
Mason, are you here?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Are you awake, or do you want to argue for Kanto Raichu?
I'm good. I'm gonna pass on this one.
Okay.
Okay. The top trainer in the world, you guys, Mason. We like to make fun of him here. Normally, we take a lot more time to roast him whenever we get a chance. All right, so I think the stage is set up. The only one, there's nothing that wasn't chosen, right? Everything was covered.
Except Keichu. I don't think anybody picked up Keichu.
Nobody picked up Kanto Raichu. I took Magneton.
Okay.
Smogon took Alolan Raichu, and nobody wanted Kanto Raichu, which is surprising
I'll take
to me.
Kanto Raichu actually then.
That trash out of here.
Oh. Choost, is that you saying?
Yeah, that was Choost.
I'll be Tasarna's champion right here. I'll take the other Raichu, yeah.
So you're ditching Dadbot Lantern for Kanto Raichu.
I think Lantern speaks for himself.
Popular pick, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he speaks for himself.
He has a little bit more to dig into.
It's so bulky, it does so much damage. I think we all know what Lantern does. So let's hear from you guys. What
Okay, so we'll start with Gots. You have a Alolan Graveler. State your case. Why a Alolan Graveler over any of the other electrics?
So right out the gate, all of the electrics are almost on par with each other. It's really about a flavor and how badly you want to beat bugs versus how much you want to beat other things. For me, being able to farm any bug matchup and any flying matchup and having neutral versus the grass that comes in to stop you typically is a big deal. Like, I've beaten a couple Venusaurs because I've had grass or extra energy and gotten off an extra Rock Blast. I've done really well even versus Vigoroth because of Stone Edge on Graveler. I've been using Golem, but they are almost identical. The big deal about Graveler is it has 6 extra defense over Golem, and that defense lets it occasionally beat Lanterns in the one shield matchup, because you can get Water Gun down to 2 damage if your opponent's using a high stat product Lantern, so very, very low attack. They can override that by just having a middleweight Lantern and having a much higher attack. Quartz, I see you. You definitely want double rock on both the Golem and Graveler. Like, Thunderbolt is terrible. Stone Edge is the way to go. Stone Edge lets you beat the mirror, whereas Thunderbolt or Wild Charge do not. And it is a much stronger fight against anything unshielded. Like, generally, you're not going to get to Stone Edge in a one shield fight because you're just going to Rock Blast twice. But unshielded, Stone Edge, just go for it.
Awesome. All right. JRE, you got Golem.
So the case for Golem over Graveler would be Wild Charge. I agree that Stone Edge is clearly superior to Thunderbolt. Moves have the advantage of being super effective against anything flying and also against bugs, which is the case for both Graveler and Golem. Even though it's an electric move, it does come out faster than Stone Edge. I know there are cases where I've been playing in the past and having even just that 5 energy difference is the difference between getting to another charge move and just dying. Wild Charge is a great move. It doesn't have the same effectiveness overall as Stone Edge, but it's a fine move on its own. It is cheaper. Matters. That being said, I would probably lean between the two for Graveler just because, like God said, the slightly better bulk. Definitely is a case to be had for Golem as well.
Interesting. All right, so who do we have next? Polymers, you got Magnezone. Go for it.
Yeah, so Magnezone does a lot of really good things here. The double resistance to flying damage, similar to the Alolan Rock Boys. Is really helpful. It's able to farm a little bit more in some of those flying matchups. And then the biggest thing is its matchups against grass, and that's why I love Magnezone. Its ability to beat Venusaur, Ivysaur, and by landing that flash cannon is huge to me because it sort of flips the arrow on the graphic, inverts that arrow, and is able to beat some of the grass options that most people bring to counter electrics.
Yeah, that is one matchup that I was tempted to represent here, but because it's shield bait dependent, I'm very hesitant to put arrows from one to another, because if that shield bait fails, then the arrow stands as it is. Generally speaking,
I don't think
does
Magnezone
lose.
has a shield bait against Venusaur. I think you can double flash cannon and still win.
Right, you just can't switch into it, right? Because if you have any kind of energy disadvantage, you'd probably losing.
It's really tight. Venusaur almost gets to that, or Magnezone barely gets to it. I mean,
right. So it's one of those really close matchups.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that is an advantage of Magneton. I mean, Zone over Magneton for sure. All right, Smogon, you have Alolan Raichu.
Yeah, well, with the elephant out of the room first, it's got that crazy niche of being able to check Feek and beat Noctowl. That's pretty unique. It has really good matchups versus all the other electrics. It can beat Lantern, it can beat the Maggies. With Chew, just really depending on who takes the Wild Charge, really. The only ones it loses to are the Golems. Bug bite damage, it still beats Vespiquen. Beat it, but it's not a horrible matchup. You can get it down pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really, it's just that it's the only check to both Vig and Noct, and I think that's a really good selling point.
Fair enough. I've used Alolan Raichu myself, and it's one of my 2 electric picks within my team. I've liked it as a pairing with Vigoroth because I can kind of choose which one I want to be able to switch in Vigoroth against, and that Wild Charge does hit hard. I'll argue for Magneton, right? Magneton has been one of my favorite picks since I got my Legacy on Christmas Day of last year. It took a lot of effort to trade with this particular individual, and I won't go into that, but I have battle scars from just having to get this Magneton trade going through. And ever since then, it's been one of my favorites. Magneton is one of the spammiest, if not the spammiest, glass cannons within the game, not just within jungle, but in general. There's so many matchups where I've been in where you're able to get in an extra discharge or magnet bomb in the last like sliver of HP available. Getting that extra charge move when it hits so hard is just really, really nice. Discharge plus magnet bomb offers a very, very wide amount of coverage, and even with a little bit of energy advantage, you're in for a lot of trouble, and you're at the very least going to force some shields on anybody who's coming in against Magneton. The other thing is, with the Alolan rocks being so prevalent, that being able to spam Magnet Bomb is kind of like a very nice thing. In the previous Sims, it felt like Magneton had a better matchup against them, but now once they've accounted for, some of the smaller nuances, it seems like it kind of goes even, if not sometimes losing in particular situations. But Magneton is definitely a viable pick, and I'm loving it so far. It's just very, very tempting to switch over to the rock types. It's just a pretty big investment for me at the moment. The downside of Magneton is for sure that if you don't have the dual legacy moveset, it's kind of a downer. Choost, take it away with Kanto Raichu.
Yeah, so the first thing that makes me consider Kanto Raichu is just literally how infuriating it is to play against in scrims. As far as like moveset and everything, and what makes it valuable, obviously it's got access to Thundershock also, unlike Alolan Raichu, so it's got that spammy nature similar to Magneton. And that also just like ups your variance, like it just makes all of the matchups a lot more volatile, where slight energy lead or something, you can swing things. Reason that I like it, along with actually biggest thing, it's the only electric that beats Lantern, which is a big thing. You always want the most popular pick in the group, arguably. Being able to take that out is definitely a big plus for any electric. But also, I just really like the ability of spamming Brick Breaks. So I would run Brick Break Wild Charge on my Raichu. Haven't tested it yet because I have the trade lined up, but not done yet. But I just really like the fact that even when you're caught in a bad matchup, you can often just like chip away at things with Brick Break, or if you have a little bit of energy stored, suddenly that Vigoroth is dealing with a lot of incoming damage that's hard to block all at once because it's so many different little spam charges. That's the biggest thing, that even when it's losing, it's usually not losing too bad, and it's putting pressure on your shields so that you make sure that you're still always getting some utility out of this mon, even if it gets walled.
Okay. And, Lantern hasn't been argued, but it is definitely a solid pick. Although it typically runs Water Gun as a fast move, it's the tankiest of the electric category. So, although it doesn't beat Vigoroth or really come close in a fresh matchup, it certainly puts some hurt into it when shields are when shields are down. So, with that being said, Quartz, everybody's stated their case. Throw up that poll for the electrics, and while that poll is going, we'll hand it off to Choose-to-Master. What are some viable double electric pairings, not just within a subgroup of a group of 6, but also a group of 3?
So I mean, the biggest and easiest thing that you look for in the pairing is like, do they change the matchups at all? Because obviously you don't want to be bringing like Graveler and Golem together. And so that's where Alolan Raichu gets really tempting, just because it is the one that can at least check Vigoroth. And so there are definitely a lot of viable matchups, Alolan Raichu with one of the other electrics. But I actually have had a little bit of success doubling up on things that do have some of the same weaknesses. So for example, Lantern with a Rock Boy has actually done relatively well for me, as long as I can catch their grass. That's going to come down a lot to just your team comp, that knowing what kind of things are big threats to your overall 6 can shape which 2 electrics you can bring with you, obviously. Say almost every pairing that I had of 2 electrics had either Alolan Raichu or Lantern. I feel like one of those 2 is a must pick if you're going to have a double electric line.
Because of the Vigoroth matchup, I'm assuming.
For the most part, yeah. And also because Lantern, yeah, like you said, with Vigoroth, I'm pretty sure in the Zero Shield it can beat it, which is, I think, the only electric that wins the Zero Shield with Vigoroth, but I could be wrong about that. I'd have to double check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very interesting on the poll results so far, what's coming in. I will open it up to the group. Any other double electric pairings that you guys are seeing? Perhaps one omitting one of the two, Alolan Raichu or Lantern?
No, I think basically everybody's just Lantern or Aichu with another electric.
Yeah.
Because Lantern beats the other electrics, say for Keichu.
And Aichu.
Yeah. I know Caleb was running a Magnezone Alolan Graveler pairing. He was just trying to double up a little bit on that category. I forget his rationale for it, and I think he did leave for the night. But maybe on a future stream we'll have him give the case for it. Although he is kind of going really sort of anti-meta in the spirit of his team. So, all right, we have 18 votes in. We'll give it what was it? 3 more minutes you have for the poll, and then we'll close it out.
That's actually how long the poll has been up for, so we can end the poll whenever we want.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and close it out before we move on to the latter part of the stream.
Sounds good.
So everybody was... It was interesting what you guys chose for your picks.
Yeah.
And the fact that Kanto Raichu kind of came in last, or didn't even come in among the group of us, and that Juice Master kind of picked it up out of pity. That's what won our poll, barely, with 27.8% of the vote. And I don't think it would be able to beat Alolan Graveler plus Alolan Golem, so that's something to consider since they're very, very similar in their matchups.
I think actually with Brick Break it beats Golem, it beats Golem but not Graveler. That's actually one of the biggest differences between Golem and Graveler is that Brick Break Raichu matchup.
Oh, for sure. What I'm saying is that in the poll, Alolan Graveler and Alolan Golem votes combined.
Oh, right, that makes sense.
Yeah, would be able to beat Kanto Raichu in this particular poll. So very interesting. I think Kanto Raichu will get a lot of play in jungle, but certainly all the other electrics are very viable, as Got said in the beginning. With that being said, any other electric questions, quirts that I might have missed within Twitch chat?
I think people were talking about Magnezone because King, I think, chose for Magnezone and people were questioning their choices. But besides that, I don't think there's an exact question for you guys.
JR Honda has a question. If you don't have Legacy Raichu and or Magneton, are they even worth running?
Ooh.
Personally, Magneton, I would say no. Thundershock is important for that energy gain, although Spark is definitely viable, but you're going to do a little bit more damage. But there's just been so many matchups where I've won with a sliver of health, and only because getting that last charge move in made just a huge difference. I'd say Magneton, no, not without the Legacy. And Kanto Raichu, because Alolan Raichu is very, very similar, and it is running Spark, I would say Kanto Raichu is viable. But I'll let the greater knowledge of the group to defer to that. Spark Raichu, anybody see that having any play?
Just run Alolan Raichu at that point.
Yeah.
But I guess you still have Brick Break.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
I don't know. Brick Break is hit or miss a lot of times because it's so weak on its damage output that you really need to be dealing super effective and potentially even 2 times super effective to make it useful.
Also, I just feel like you need the Thundershock to be able to pump out a bunch of those. Because the place where I found Brick Break makes the most difference is just squeezing that extra little bit of chunk damage here and there. And if you're running Spark, you're just not going to hit it often enough.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely slower, and getting a third or even a second in really bad matchups will swing matchups for you in your.
Yeah, that's how it wins the mirror to the Thunder Punch version as well. Like Chus was saying, they both land the Wild Charge and the Zero Shield, and then the Brick Break version is able to get to that Brick Break a little bit faster than the Thunder Punch version can get to Thunder Punch. So.
All right. Well, I think we can move on to the sort of closing, which is revisiting our preliminary 6 choices of teams of 6. Earlier last month, what we did was kind of gun to the head, choose 6 based on what you know right now, and we kind of wanted to contrast that to what people will choose once they have a little bit better of a grasp on the meta. So, Polymers, we'll start with you. What are the 6 that you are looking at right now?
Oh man, yeah, I really want to bring like 10 to 12. There's just so many good picks here. But I guess, yeah, if I had to pick a 6 right now, I think I'd definitely start with Vig and Noct, and then B-Drill right now is one that I'm definitely bringing because I really like how it has a couple of wins against some of the electrics like Lantern. Then I'd probably go Victory Bell and Magnazone.
Okay.
And Lantern.
All right. So contrast that to what you said last time. I don't know if you remember this, but your team was Fortress, Vigoroth, Magnazone, Heracross, Noctowl, Masquerain. So really only Magnazone, Noctowl, and Vigoroth survived your chopping block.
Yep.
I think this is something that we'll see a little bit more of, especially with Fortress case.
Yeah, I decided to go double electrics, at least for the time being. And then I will say Heracross is one of those ones that I'm constantly going back and forth between that and Vigoroth, that and Beedrill, because they both have some decent electric matchups and are hard counters or the hardest counter that you can have, at least in this meta, to Vigoroth.
That's still X-Scissor, right? Beedrill?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Gots, you were also on the previous stream. What's your team of 6 right now looking like?
If I had to go into tournament today, it'd be Vig, Noct. Obviously, I don't think you can not take those 2. Even though I really love Scyther and Masquerain, Noctowl's just that much better. I would take my Graveler because I do like the farmability of Graveler. I would be on Victory Bell as well because I think Razor Leaf is just a better matchup versus everything Grass wants to do over Venusaur. Venusaur is reliant on charge attacks and iffy, especially versus Magnazone, whereas Victory Bell can beat Magnazone. Venusaur doesn't do so well there. I've dropped Fortress in favor of Vespiquen because of the Vigoroth matchup. And it's just really strong. It's a great late game cleaner versus any Razor Leaf, any Grass, most bugs, and Vigoroth itself. And my 6 is a flex spot. Right now it's Heracross. I like it as an alternative counter user, but I could drop it for Lantern or Achu or even Fortress back because Fortress picks up a lot of off-meta wins that would help smooth my team versus any kind of wild cards out there.
So you were actually one of the few teams that didn't have Fortress in your 6. When I listened back to the stream, your 6 were Vigoroth, Alolan Graveler, Scyther, Victory Bell, Noctowl, and Masquerain. So you were doubling up on bug flyers when I just hit you up on the spot. So it's interesting how both Masquerade and Scyther have been chopped out, and it's sort of in line with what our discussion was today. And it's also interesting that you kept Victory Bell.
I like the Razor Leaf damage. I really do.
Yeah.
And I dropped Scyther and Masquerade because originally they had great matchups versus Fortress and Vigoroth. But with Fortress being on the down a little bit, not much anymore, and the Vigoroth matchup being a lot sketchier. Like, even though you can win as Scyther, it is sketchier. I've dropped it in favor of Vespiquen just because it has that more solid Vig matchup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Personally, my team is also in kind of like a state of flux right now. I think right now, if I had to join a tournament, I'd very begrudgingly invest in a Noctowl, or not in a Noctowl, but in a Alolan Golem or Alolan Graveler. Either one, whichever was cheaper in my case. I would go with Vigoroth. I would go with probably Heracross, that Alolan Rock type, Alolan Raichu, and then I would also most likely end up with either Exeggutor for one of the grass types, and possibly, let's see, Vespiquen for my sort of bug type. But again, that's in scrims, that's it's changing all the time, and who knows what I end up picking in my eventual tournament. Initially, I had Fortress, Vigoroth, Magneton, Vespiquen, Heracross, Meganium. I just wanted to see whether Meganium could get any play, and I'm not really convinced in its matchups this time around. I'm really liking Alolan Raichu. Probably more so than Magneton, if I'm honest with myself. I've really tried to make Magneton work, but it kind of falls short in a lot of situations where shields are still up and they're able to sort of farm me with their fast moves. So, with that being said, there were some other matchups here, but none of those people that were on the previous stream are on right now. So I'll just open it up to you guys. I'll start with Choose Master, gun to the head. You have to choose 6 right now. What would you be choosing?
I mean, Vigoroth, Noctowl, automatic ins also. I'm not as ballsy as Caleb, I guess. Definitely one of the Rock Boys also. I've been playing with Golem, but just because that's what I have set. I'm leaning Victory Bell over Venusaur. And then I'm torn. I want to say Fortress, but it might be Vespiquen for the last one.
Yeah. A lot of the sort of team builds have been following that sort of archetype that we've been advocating for. So it's it's kind of loose in its description, but most teams are going to still have Vigoroth. They're going to have some variant of normal flying coverage. I think a lot of people aren't going to swap out Noctowl just with how good it is. Like I said, I've just been struggling to not bring it because my team end up being weak to stuff that I don't want to be weak to. Let's see. Smogon, your team of 6 that you brought into Toronto, what were your your lineup?
I'm actually running something a little different now, but
okay.
That one was I had the Alolan Raichu and Lantern for a double electric. Exeggutor, Vigoroth and Noct, and a Beedrill for that.
Mm-hmm. And what changes would you make?
I really like Exeggutor, and I have a strong feeling I'm going to end up back at it. Mm-hmm. But right now, I just kind of wanted to test out some other stuff to make sure I'm not missing out. So I'm kind of going back to Venusaur.
Okay.
Alolan Raichu and the Magneton with a Venusaur, Vigoroth, and Vespiquen. So basically, awesome. Yeah, just wanted to strengthen up my Beedrill matchup, so I had to drop Lant for Maggie.
All right, JRE, gun to the head. I guess you're obviously going to be picking Cradley, Armaldo. All of those under the lights picks are obligatory, right?
Off meta. Throw
Okay.
Lunoon in there, No, so Vigoroth and Noctowl, I agree, those are obvious. My other four right now are Alolan Graveler, power of Stone Edge. I know I was talking up Wild Charge earlier, but the power and the coverage of Stone Edge is just hard to ignore. I've also got Venusaur. I kind of hitched my wagon to that back when the Nifty or Thrifty this month, to talking it up. So I see the appeal of the Razor Leafers, but it's hard for me to ignore the coverage that Venusaur has, how easily it can beat other grasses. I'm still sticking with that for now. Then for my last couple of picks, I'm kind of torn between a couple of things. I am looking at Kanto Raichu. I love Beedrill. He's on my team right now, but we'll see if that holds up. I just like how it handles Vigoroth. So I'm kind of torn between going double electric or double bug with Beedrill and potentially Heracross.
Interesting.
I'm kind of down to 7 instead of 6 at the moment, and I just kind of play around with them, and I'll settle on it soon. I just haven't had it yet.
I'm sure if you just make more articles per month, Self Arena will just allow you to bring 7 instead of 6. That's somewhere in the rules.
That'd be awesome.
I missed what was the sixth one was exactly? After
I'm
Raichu?
sorry. So let me review again. So Vigoroth, Noctowl, Alolan Graveler, Beedrill,
Beedrill.
Soar, if I didn't mention that, and then my last is kind of down to either Kanto Raichu or Heracross at the moment.
Perfect.
Interesting. Well, awesome, you guys. That's pretty much it. We're just over the 2 hour, 15-minute mark. We did pretty good. Some of these run pretty long. There's a lot of awesome activity in the Twitch. I love to see it going on with the polls, and King IV has been really awesome and showing up some interesting matchups. Definitely check out his YouTube channel. He's always really involved in all stuff Go Stadium. And thank you so much to the followers, and I don't think we got any new subscriptions this time around, but it's the popularity is growing so fast, and it's been a really awesome experience for all of us here, and we just can't stress it enough. A lot of you guys were asking about the drawings. I'll admit that I've been the author of these drawings so far. I'm most proud of the trash can, if I'm honest. That's the most favorite thing to come up with every month, and Dunsparce and Giraffrig seem like the best candidates for it. So if you like those drawings, I am on Twitter. A lot of us are, and I do post some of those preliminarily. So those people that were on Patreon, they got a sneak peek at that infographic before the month. In fact, before some of the final edits too. So that was pretty nice. And I think that's it, you guys. I don't really have much else. Quartz, I'll hand it off to you, and you can close if you have any more announcements.
Perfect. So yeah, just one more thing. I promised yesterday that we would have gotten our Twitch emotes approved by right now. As you can see, pending. I don't know how many subscribers we have watching the stream right now exactly, but at the moment, I could to vote for which 3 to include in our tier 1. But at the moment, it's the Head Knowledge, Raichu Kappa, and Camera Up. Actually, let me zoom in. And the tier 1s. But once we unlock more, so we're 30 out of 35 points. Once we unlock once the next milestone, we'll have 4 emotes for all subscribers to use. So hopefully that will be Camera Up gets your vote. Perfect. So Yeah, I'm assuming that because this is our first ever emotes that are being uploaded, it's taking longer than usual, but I'm pretty sure that the next ones will be a lot quicker. So the last thing we want to bring up before ending is Patreon as usual. This is how we end all our streams, by giving a huge shout out to all our patrons. So Honda just pulled up the link. That's how you can show us a little extra support there. We have the next project that we're working on is more merchandise, and we'll announce that once it's ready. Otherwise, yeah, thanking our guests once again. We had a lot of interesting people and very talented people who've been doing their homework on the jungle, join in offering some insight. And this weekend, I mean, a lot of people are going to start their jungle tournament this weekend already. So all the best to you guys. Hopefully you learned something from tonight. And we will be... Yeah, it was this... Did somebody else want to say something? If not, we will be raiding with our viewers as we always do. So I managed to find someone who's actually doing some PvP tonight. So they're not doing jungle exactly. Seems like they're doing some freestyle Great Leagues. So Shadow Exodus, let's go give them a raid as well. See what's up over there. And once the countdown is ready, we will head over and then the stream will end. So thank you again, guys, for watching. The video will be up on YouTube. We'll be back very soon for team reviews, so you can start filling up the team review channels with your best 6, and we'll roast you on the next stream. So yep. See you guys next time.